Millionaire's son did the unthinkable to the maid, but what followed will break your heart. Stay with me till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far the truth really spreads. Lucas sank his teeth into Elena's arm so hard that her skin tore open. Blood streamed down her wrist and spotted the polished marble floor of the Torres estate. Gasps echoed through the grand hall as servants froze in place, their faces pale with shock. Rosa, the cook, dropped a tray, and the sound of breaking dishes rang like thunder through the silence. Hector, the driver, rushed forward but stopped when the boy growled, a low and feral sound that made the hair on his neck rise. Lucas's small face twisted with fury, but beneath the rage was fear, sharp and raw. He clung to Elena's arm, as though letting go would leave him defenseless in a world he could not control. The staff had seen his violent fits before, but never like this, never with blood. Everyone expected Elena to scream, to yank her arm away, to fight back. Instead, she remained on her knees, offering herself without hesitation. Elena did not cry out. She did not flinch even as the pain spread like fire up her arm. Slowly, she placed her free hand on Lucas's back, her touch light and steady. Her voice came gentle and calm, telling him it was all right, telling him to breathe. The boy's jaw tightened, his teeth pressing deeper for one terrifying second. But Elena leaned closer, whispering that she understood, that the pain he carried inside was far worse than the pain on her skin. Lucas's dark eyes flickered, confusion breaking through the storm. He blinked hard, his breath ragged, and for a moment no one dared to move. Then, with a trembling gasp, he released her arm. Silence fell heavy as stone across the hall. His chest rose and fell quickly, and then he collapsed into Elena's arms, as if he had been holding his breath for years. The sound that followed pierced every heart in the room. Lucas cried, not with the empty screams they had grown used to, but with the broken sobs of a child who had finally found a safe place. His small body shook as Elena held him tighter, rocking him as tears spilled from her own eyes. She whispered that she was here, that she would not leave, that he was safe now. Rosa covered her mouth with trembling hands, unable to believe what she saw. Hector turned his face away, blinking fast to hold back tears. For 2 years, Lucas had rejected every touch, every attempt to comfort him. Now, in the arms of a maid no one truly knew, he wept like a son who had finally come home. At the top of the staircase, Adrian Torres stood frozen, his hand gripping the banister so hard his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded violently in his chest as he stared down at the impossible sight. Since the death of his wife, his son had been locked in silence, unreachable, untouchable. 6 therapists had come and gone, defeated by Lucas's walls. And yet here was Elena, her uniform faded, her sneakers worn, holding his son as if she had been born to understand him. Hope surged in Adrian's chest, burning with a light he had not felt in years. But along with that hope came fear, cold and sharp. How had she done this? Why her, and not the experts? He could not answer, and the not knowing left him shaken. Dr. Camila Vega entered the hall just as Lucas's sobs quieted. Her eyes fixed on the boy clinging to Elena, and her voice cut sharp against the fragile calm. She said such a sudden change was unnatural, that children like him never transformed overnight. Adrian froze at her words. His heart wanted to believe what his eyes saw, yet reason whispered that Camila was right. Lucas pressed tighter against Elena's chest, his small body trembling, but this time it was not from rage. For the first time in years, he rested in someone's arms. Elena stayed silent. She reached into her small bag and drew out handmade cards with simple drawings, a heart, a smile, a tear. She placed them before Lucas and told him he could use them when words were too heavy. The boy's hand shook as he picked up the red heart. Elena's smile softened as she asked if it meant he liked her. Lucas nodded, and then came the miracle. His lips curved into a small, hesitant smile. The room gasped. Rosa crossed herself. Hector turned away to hide his tears. Adrian's chest ached as if the sight had broken something locked inside him. He had begged heaven for this moment, a smile from his son. Now it came, yet his joy was pierced by Camilla's warning. She whispered to him that such progress was suspicious. Maybe the maid had pushed the boy into crisis, only to swoop in as savior. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes burned with something colder. Adrian looked down again. Elena's arm still bled, yet she held Lucas as if nothing else in the world mattered. His son smiled, but his mind swirled with doubt. Adrian had not slept in days. Camilla's quiet warnings haunted him. She had said no child like Lucas could change so suddenly that sometimes people forced a crisis only to look like saviors. Her words returned each night as he lay awake, torn between what he had seen with his eyes and what reason whispered. So when he opened the velvet box in his study and saw Isabella's bracelet missing, something inside him snapped. His heart raced as if he had lost his wife all over again. That bracelet had been her treasure, a symbol of their happiest day. Now it was gone, stolen from the shrine of memory he had guarded so fiercely. His voice thundered through the house. He demanded every servant gather. His eyes burned as he declared the bracelet missing and ordered a search. Not a room, not a drawer, not a pocket would be spared. He said it was not just theft, it was betrayal. The staff scattered in panic. Rosa's hands shook as she emptied her cupboards. Hector opened his trunk, muttering prayers. Adrian stormed into the maid's quarters, his grief turning to anger. He pulled open drawers, blankets flying, his breath ragged as his heart pounded. Then it happened. Beneath Elena's neatly folded uniforms, the bracelet shimmered in the light. Gasps filled the room. Rosa pressed a hand to her chest. Hector cursed under his breath. Camilla stepped forward, her face arranged in sorrow, her eyes wet with false pity. She murmured that she had always feared this, that sometimes appearances deceived. Adrian froze, the bracelet heavy in his hand. His chest tightened. He lifted his gaze to Elena. She stood pale, her lips trembling, her eyes wide with shock. She whispered that she had never seen it, that someone had put it there. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she begged him to believe her. For a moment, his mind wavered. He remembered her holding Lucas, blood running down her arm, whispering comfort instead of anger. He remembered the red mark from his son's bite, still staining her skin. His heart told him she was true, but Camilla's words gnawed like poison. Too fast, too good, a trap. Adrian's hand shook as he clutched the bracelet tighter. Rosa's voice broke the silence, trembling as she said Elena had always worked hard, that she could not believe such a thing. But before Adrian could answer, Camilla cut in smoothly. She said loyalty could blind people, that sometimes kindness was only a mask. Her tone silenced Rosa, leaving Elena alone in the storm. Adrian's chest heaved. The battle inside him raged until grief and fury won. His voice broke as he told Elena he had trusted her with his son, and she had betrayed him. Elena dropped to her knees, sobbing, her voice shaking as she swore she was innocent. She held out her wounded arm as proof of her sacrifice, but Adrian turned away, his jaw clenched as he ordered her to leave. The staff gathered at the doorway, murmuring. Some shook their heads in judgment. Others avoided her eyes. Elena's hands shook as she unbuttoned her uniform, folding it carefully as though dignity was all she had left. She turned to Lucas. The boy stood frozen in the corner, his chest rising fast, his eyes wild with terror. Then a sound ripped from him that shattered the air. He screamed, slamming his fists against the glass window as Elena stepped outside. His cries were not words, only raw agony, the desperate wails of a child watching the only person who understood him vanish. Adrian closed his eyes, but the sound cut into him like knives. And in that moment, memory rose unbidden. The night Isabella died, he had heard the same sound, her final scream echoing in his ears, a cry he could not stop. Now, his son's scream carried the same weight, tearing open wounds that had never healed. He wanted to call Elena back. The words rose to his lips, but pride and pain sealed them shut. His jaw trembled, his fists clenched, and he stood in silence while his son howled. And in the shadows, Camilla smiled, small and cold. Her trap had worked. Elena was gone. The mansion grew heavier with every passing day after Elena's departure. Lucas refused food, his lips pressed tight as Rosa begged him to eat. He turned from Hector's gentle coaxing, his small frame shrinking like a shadow. At night, his scream split the dark, the same scream that had torn through Adrian's chest the night Elena walked away. On the third morning, Adrian entered Lucas's room and froze. The floor was covered with drawings, frantic lines pressed hard into the paper. Over and over, the same images appeared. A woman with kind eyes holding a child, and behind them, a dark figure with long hair, scratching red marks across the boy's chest. Adrian's hands shook as he lifted one page. His voice cracked as he asked who it was. Lucas grabbed a fresh sheet and drew again, clearer this time. The sharp face, the long hair, the eyes like ice. The boy pressed so hard, the marker tore the paper as he slashed it out. His growl rumbled, his chest rising fast. Adrian whispered the name, Camila. Lucas nodded hard, then ripped the paper into pieces, his whole body shaking with rage. A seed of terror sprouted in Adrian's chest. Could he have been blind? He remembered Elena's tears, her wounded arm, her desperate pleas. He remembered turning away. And now his son's drawings screamed the truth he had refused to see. That night Adrian installed hidden cameras, his hands trembling as he worked. He told no one. When the footage appeared the next evening, he forced himself to watch, heart-hammering. The first clip showed Camila sitting beside Lucas as he drew. Her tone was soft, almost motherly, yet her words were poison. She whispered that his father hated him, that Adrian only kept him because he had to, not because he loved him. Lucas whimpered and rocked, clutching his knees, but she leaned closer and pinched his arm hard. His cry echoed in the empty room. Adrian's fists clenched, rage rising like fire. He could have stopped there. He wanted to, but he clicked the next file. This time, Camila's voice was colder. She told Lucas that Elena had left because she never loved him, that Elena had seen what he really was and walked away. Lucas's face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. He shook his head, rocking faster, his breath shallow. Camila tightened her grip on his shoulders, forcing him to stay still, hissing that no one would ever stay for him. Adrian's throat closed as he watched. The third clip was worse. Adrian almost stopped it, but some dark part of him knew he needed the whole truth. On the screen, Camila crouched low beside the boy, her lips close to his ear. She told him that his father would be happier if he disappeared, that only if he was gone would Adrian finally smile again. She repeated it again and again, each word a dagger. Lucas's small body curled tighter, his sobs turning into guttural cries. Adrian's chest heaved as the screen blurred before his eyes. Each video was another wound. His heart tore open as the realization struck. He had not only accused the wrong person, he had left his son defenseless in the hands of a monster. He gathered the recordings with trembling hands, along with the torn cards found in her car and the drawings that littered Lucas's floor. The evidence was undeniable, but the guilt was heavier than iron. He had doubted the one person who had given his son hope, and now his child bore wounds that could not be unseen. The next morning, Adrian walked into the police station, carrying the thick folder. The officer in charge watched the footage in silence, his jaw hardening with each frame. When Camila's whisper came through, telling a 7-year-old boy that he should die, the officer slammed the file shut. That was enough. That afternoon, police entered the Torres estate. Camila's mask cracked as the cuffs closed around her wrists. She screamed that she was a professional, that everything she had done was for the boy's good. But no one listened. The staff stood in shock, shame etched into their faces. Rosa whispered through tears that they had been blind. Hector lowered his gaze, unable to meet Adrian's eyes. Adrian remained in the doorway, his body trembling. He watched as Camila was dragged out, still spewing venom. But her words no longer mattered. The truth was laid bare, and it cut deeper than any blade. He had driven away the only person who had healed his son, and in doing so, had nearly destroyed them both. Adrian drove through streets that grew narrower and poorer with every turn. The car's polished frame looked out of place among crumbling walls and sagging roofs. His chest ached as he gripped the wheel, his mind replaying every detail he wished he could erase. Elena's bloodied arm, her tear-streaked face as she swore she was innocent, the sound of Lucas screaming as she walked away. He had turned his back, deaf to her cries. Now the guilt was a weight crushing him, heavier than any burden of wealth. Each stoplight seemed to mock him, forcing him to sit in silence with the truth. He had doubted the only person who had reached his son. He had cast her out and left her alone in the cold, while protecting the one who poisoned his child. His mind whispered that perhaps she would never forgive him. Still, he drove on, because to remain silent would mean living with this shame forever. The car stopped before a faded blue house at the end of a narrow street. Children played barefoot in the dust, their laughter echoing off broken walls. Neighbors turned their heads when they saw the black luxury car, their eyes narrowing. Adrian stepped out, and for the first time in years, the proud master of the Torres estate felt small. The door opened to reveal Maria, Elena's mother. Her grey hair was tied back, her eyes sharp with anger. She did not wait for him to speak. She told him he was the man who had made her daughter cry, the man who had shattered her trust. Her words struck harder than any blade. Adrian's throat tightened. He lowered himself to his knees right there on the cracked sidewalk. His expensive suit brushed against the dust, but he no longer cared. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief at the sight of the powerful Torres kneeling before a poor woman's door. His voice shook as he confessed his sins. He said he had been blind, that his weakness had left his son broken and Elena disgraced. He told them Camila had been arrested, that the truth was out, but no truth could erase what he had done. From the shadows, Elena appeared. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from nights of tears. She froze when she saw him kneeling, her body stiff, as if afraid to believe what she saw. Adrian lifted his head, his voice breaking as he begged her to forgive him. He said he had accused her of betrayal when all she had ever given was love. Tears slipped down his cheeks as he promised he would spend the rest of his life making it right. The silence was heavy until a sound split it apart. Lucas stumbled forward, clutching the red heart card she had once given him. His lips parted, trembling, and then, for the first time in years, a word came. Elena. The neighbors gasped, some covering their mouths, others wiping their eyes. Elena's hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled. She dropped to her knees and opened her arms. Lucas ran into her, burying his face against her chest, sobbing. She held him tight, whispering that she would never let him go again. Maria's stern face softened, and she wiped her eyes as she stepped closer. She said that when a child like Lucas chooses someone, it is never chance. It is a gift from God. She told Adrian that such a bond is sacred, stronger than wealth or pride. Her words carried the weight of truth, and Adrian bowed his head, humbled before her wisdom. Elena looked up at him, her arms wrapped around Lucas. Her voice trembled as she said she could not return as a servant. If she came back, it would be as family, because Lucas already saw her as his mother. Adrian's voice broke as he swore that was all he wanted, that he needed her not as help, but as the heart of their home. The neighbors began to clap softly, some nodding through tears. Maria smiled for the first time, telling her daughter that love had already chosen for her. And in that moment, with Lucas clinging to her and Adrian kneeling in the dust, the broken pieces began to mend. Elena whispered that she would come home. Life in the Torres household slowly shifted into something brighter. Elena was no longer the maid who cleaned in silence. She became the voice Lucas listened to, the arms he sought, the steady presence he trusted. Adrian watched in awe as his son smiled more often, spoke small words, then longer sentences, each one a miracle that lifted years of sorrow from his chest. Adrian still carried guilt, but Elena's patience softened him. She never threw his mistakes in his face. She simply stayed, guiding Lucas with tender care and quietly healing Adrian too. One evening in the garden, with roses in bloom, Adrian took her hand. His voice shook as he told her she had healed not only Lucas but also him. From his pocket he pulled a simple ring, nothing grand, just a small stone that caught the fading light. He asked her to stay by his side, not as a servant, but as his partner. Elena's tears spilled as she whispered yes. Their wedding was held in the garden, small and warm, with Rosa, Hector, Maria, and a few neighbors. Elena wore a modest white dress, Adrian an old suit. Lucas carried the rings with all the seriousness of a soldier. When the vows were spoken, the boy's face broke into a smile, and then he said, his voice trembling, that he finally had his mother back, and she would never leave him again. The guests wiped their eyes, their hearts breaking open at his words. For Adrian and Elena, no promise could have been greater. Months later, Elena gave birth to a baby girl. The house filled with soft laughter and tiny cries. Lucas was the most excited of all. He held his sister's small hand, whispering clumsy lullabies, proud to call himself her big brother. He grew calmer, kinder, protective in ways no one thought possible. One afternoon, Adrian found Lucas at the table, bent over a sheet of paper. The boy's tongue poked out in concentration as his small hand moved the crayon. When Adrian leaned closer, he saw the drawing, a family holding hands beneath a bright Sunday, father, mother, Lucas, and the new baby. At the bottom, in shaky letters, Lucas had written, "Now I have Dad, Mom, and little sister." Adrian's eyes blurred as he pulled his son close. The picture was more than art. It was proof that the broken boy had finally found wholeness. Later that evening, the family sat in the garden together. Adrian's arm rested around Elena as she cradled the baby, and Lucas pressed close, holding his sister's hand. The boy looked up, his smile radiant, and said they were now the happiest family in the world. Adrian and Elena exchanged a glance, filled with gratitude and awe. After years of loss and shadows, life had brought them here to love, to healing, to peace. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes, the place where true accounts and moving fiction come together to heal, uplift, and remind us of life's deepest values. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep your heart open. Don't forget to subscribe Emotional Echoes for more soul-stirring stories. Thanks for listening.